Okay, Sam, I decided to make you a video tutorial rather than trying to write down what I did. That way you can see exactly what I did and what it does. A few things you should know before we start the tutorial is that I've got the mouse set to where if I left click, it should give you a little red ring. Do you see the little red ring? And if I right click, it should sort of warp the screen right there. Okay, so left click, little red ring, right click, warp the screen. Um, I'll try to say if I'm left or right clicking, but sometimes I might forget. Anyway, so we'll see how this is going to go. Okay, so right here is your original image. This is what you sent me. And we're going to actually go through a series of basically 3 steps. There's many sub-steps to each step, but 3 basic steps. Our first step will get us this. There it comes. Okay, we'll get this as a product, which looks pretty good. And then our second step will get us this, which actually looks worse, but we're getting there. We're just not quite there yet. And then our final image should look something like this. And I have to be honest, I think I may have warmed it up a little too much, but we're going to go for it and see what happens. Okay, so before we get into the actual editing, you might want to make sure that your screen looks like my screen. And as you can see over here on this side, I have my layers, channels, and paths palette open here. And then up here I have my adjustments and my mask panel open. I have to be honest, I never use this mask panel, but I use the adjustment panel all the time. So to make sure that you have these things open, go up to Window, and you want to make sure you have the adjustments checked, and you want to make sure you have the layers checked. You can see I also have options and tools checked as well. And then nothing else. These other things, I can open them if I need to, but they're normally just in my way, so I don't mess with them. Alright, so now we're ready to start editing. I made a copy of the image, and I'm actually working on the copy. That way I can click back and show you what the original image looked like, just so you know why there's 2 open up here. And the very first thing we're going to do is run an action. Now this is an action that I wrote when I was editing some pictures of Sloan. So I named the action Rosie. And I will email this action to you or send you a link to a file where you can download it or something. But anyway, we're going to go over here. This is the action icon, and when we click on it, we open up an actions palette. Each one of these folders, some of these folders have more than one action in it, and I used to actually have a lot more actions in this, but I've gotten away from using them. I just have a few that I use frequently, and I hang on to them. And the ones I've written are in here. And this very first one, Rosie's the one we're going to be using. So to run an action, we make sure it's highlighted in blue, and then go down to the play button down here and left click on it, normal click. And then we just sit and wait. And I'm going to go ahead and close the actions palette. And we went from this to this with one click. Now it needs some adjustment, so we're going to go in and make a few adjustments on the layers palette over here. We're going to increase this gradient map, this one right here, to about 30%. Now this is something you just sort of play and eyeball. Every picture is not going to be the same. You can see that what this gradient map is doing is adding a little warm tone to the picture. Just sort of warming it up some so it's not quite so cold looking. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to this hue saturation layer, make sure it's blue, and we're going to click on this to make sure that up here in our hue adjustment layer that we get the hue saturation layer up. You notice how it says +8? Well, we're going to drop that down to +2. Now you can actually do this by dragging the slider, or you can click inside here and just put in whatever number it is you want. They both work. Okay, So let's look at what the hue saturation layer does. It's very, very subtle change in color. I almost turned it off completely, but just a little bump in her bow or her little flower in her hair. Just wanted to add that little bump in there. Now we're going to take this gradient map that we messed with a while ago. We should have done this a while ago when we were messing with it. And we're going to copy this gradient layer. Now there's multiple ways of doing this. You can go up to the layers and then say duplicate layer, or you can right click on the layer and say duplicate layer. But I'm a keyboard shortcut junkie, so what I do is hit Control J and that duplicates the layer. Now we have gradient map 1 copy. Okay? And you can see the copy does affect the picture. And it affects Hattie's skin way too much. So now what we're going to do is go in and mask Hattie out. I don't know if you've used layer mask or not, but when you have a layer, right beside that layer, if it's an adjustment layer, you'll have a white box. Anything that's white on this layer mask is being affected. Anything that's black is not being affected. So if we want to take the effect off of Hattie's skin, we need to mask her out on the layer mask in black. Now I want to show you the difference between clicking on a layer and a layer mask. This, I'm now clicked on the layer. If I click on the white box, see how it hits the box around it? Now I'm on the layer mask. So what I'm going to do is get a brush, and I want to make sure it's a nice soft brush, so where it says hardness, I want it to be down low. And I can adjust the diameter here, or I can use the bracket keys on my keyboard to adjust the diameter, and that's what I normally do. And I'm going to adjust the opacity somewhere around 75%, I think. I'm going to increase my brush size. I'm using the bracket. Left bracket makes it smaller, right bracket makes it bigger, and I didn't choose black. And over here, I'm going to click and make sure that I have black as my first palette. And see, all I'm doing is painting right over Hattie's skin and getting rid of the treatment from the layer mask. Now I'm doing this kind of sloppy. My original one, I was much more careful. You know, you can zoom in and make sure you're getting right on the edges without going over. And it just takes practice. And to zoom back out, I'm going to hit the zoom button and Alt, and you'll see I have a negative magnifier. Okay. So that's pretty good. I mean, you know, it's not perfect, but for demonstration purposes it'll work. Now, anytime you click when you're doing a layer mask, if you're not using 100% black or 100% white, whenever you let off your mouse and you click again, any area you go back over, you're undoing the effect more or redoing the effect more, whatever case may be. Also, when you're using a layer mask, if you want to erase something you mask, you just switch colors. Say like, I wanted to erase undoing Hattie's face. I just switched to white, and now her face is back to being yellow again. We don't want it yellow. So I'm going to switch back to black and undo her face. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bump this opacity up to 100 and completely take that yellow off her face. Her little red hair doesn't need any extra yellow. Okay. Now also, I really like the effect that the gradient map has on the background, and I want to make it a little stronger. So we're going to bump this opacity of this gradient map up to about, I like it right about there. That looks good. 45%. Looks good to me. Okay, so we're finished with the gradient map. We're through with it. Let's drop down to this curves layer right here. Make sure it's blue, it's highlighted, so we're affecting it. And we're going to mask out at this time. First, let's look what the curves layer does. See, basically the curves layer brightens the entire image. Now, I love Hattie being brighter, but I like the background being a little darker. So this time, instead of masking out Hattie, we're going to mask out the background. That way, Hattie has this brightness that she has here, but the background will be darker. So I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on the layer mask, the white box right here, and then I'm going to go pick my brush again. I'm going to make sure I have black selected, and I'm going to get a much bigger brush. So I'm going to use that right bracket to get a big old brush out of it, and drop the opacity down, let's say about 75%. My computer's moving a little slow this morning. Okay, do a little over here. Since I have such a giant brush and it's so soft, I don't have to be real careful. I'm just trying to bring in some darkness into the background because I just sort of like that look. Okay, so now if I want to see what I actually mask, I'm going to hit Alt and click on my layer mask. And you can see what I actually mask, how it looks. Okay, hit Alt and click on it again and it goes back to my picture. And I'm going to mask just a little bit more right there. Okay, this is a how you like it sort of thing. Now you'll notice I didn't mask up here in this corner. That corner is already really dark, and if I make it darker, it's going to stand out, and it's going to make Hattie not stand out as much. And we're going to add a little vignette at the end, so we don't want to make it any darker than it already is. Okay, so we're through with our curves.